Well, welcome to Ride the Stream. I'm Michelle and I'm here with co-host Travis, where we discuss old and new television series and films streaming on our favorite platforms. And we have started with the television series Lost, which originally aired from 2004 to 2010 for a total of 121 whopping episodes. And at the time of this recording, all seasons are currently available over at Netflix. So, as I said, I'm Michelle. I'm an independent pop culture scholar. I have edited books on James Bond, space horror films, as well as co-editing a collection on horror literature. And I'm currently co-editing a book of essays on the Mummy franchise that'll be released in 2026. And of course, as I said before, I'm joined by my co-host, Travis.
Hello. I am a fiction and entertainment writer. I've published about a handful of fiction books, ranging from dystopian to romance, um, written for I don't know how many different entertainment sites over the last 5 or 6 years. Presently writing for Fanbase Press, and I've started my own Substack earlier this year to give myself a little more flexibility with what I'm writing about, which I'm currently covering the reality TV show Survivor on a week-to-week basis.
It's funny how that kind of dovetails nicely with Lost in so many ways. So,
Totally.
and I'll just briefly, in case you're new, give a little background on why we chose Lost. We've actually been wanting to do Ride the Stream for quite a while as a podcast. And because we are totally lo-fi and both are our own employers, I guess. We're both freelance. So money's a little on the tighter side. So we thought, well, YouTube is still free. Right now.
Yeah.
So we thought, we'd use the YouTube platform, and later we hope to have the same episodes available in a podcast format so you can take us on the go. But for right now, you have to watch our faces and our reactions to things. But getting back to why we chose Lost, I'm a newbie. I did not have the opportunity to watch Lost when it first aired. In fact, I didn't know anything about it until it happened to be, I mean, I heard about it over the years, but never watched it. Um, and then, oh, I guess it was about a month ago, I like to watch series on Netflix that have everything. So, like, I've watched Supernatural. I started watching actually Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but that went away before I could watch all of it. Star Trek Deep Space Nine was another one. So I hit on Lost and I started watching it, and it was just fortuitous because I wrote you, Travis, and I said, "Hey, have you happened to watch Lost?" And you were like, "Oh boy."
I was so excited. I was like, tell me what you think. Tell me all about it. Like, let me know how you think, what everything you know about each episode. Like I was all into it. And I've seen it, the whole series, several times over now, but I hadn't watched it in, I don't know, at least 5 or 6 years. Um, so, you know, my wife and I were in the process of deciding, are we going to get another streaming service because we dropped Disney Plus because, you know, constant growth in the price tag. And so the kids were excited about the premise of getting Netflix. And then I think we were like, okay, we're going to do Netflix. We just have to decide when.
Mhm.
And then you emailed about Lost and that Friday. I think you emailed maybe that like earlier part midweek. And then by that Friday, I signed us up for, so, um, It is such a joy to rewatch this and get to talk to you about it. And getting your experience as a newbie is fascinating. You've had some incredible takes on different scenes that I had never even considered. One being the uh, episode 2 or 3 when Kate is about to get caught by the marshal and she's worried for the farmer's safety and takes the wheel. Like that's a as soon as were talking about that, I was like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. Like
Yeah.
so this has been amazing. Every time you tell me how many episodes it is, I get so excited because we have a long way to go, which means a whole lot of us chatting about it, which makes me very happy.
Oh, me too, me too. The next 2.3 years to be exact. But we are up
Love
for the
it.
challenge. I know we will march through and have a great time doing it. So I guess without further ado, we are on episode 6 of the first season, and this one is titled House of the Rising Sun. It originally broadcast on October 27th, 2004. And one of the things that we've been kind of watching for is some of the music. I know that came up particularly in last week's episode, talking about the ambient music. This week, we actually have featured music, the song Are You Sure by Willie Nelson, and I'm sure we'll be discussing that more at length um, as we get into the conversation. But before we do that, of course, we need to kind of take a look back and do a plot synopsis of what transpired during this episode. So, without further ado, we'll go ahead and get into that. So, in the last episode, one of the major themes was the need for the survivors to come together. Otherwise, they will not survive. They'll die alone. But this week's episode revealed there are many surface fractures and deep secret wounds that keep the survivors struggling to come together, such as barriers of language and culture were two fractures explored this week. For instance, Jin violently attacks Michael in front of Walt and Sun, and the two must be separated by Saeed and Sawyer. Jun is handcuffed to the wreckage, and Sun, who Jun expects to stay at his side, cares for him as he stews in the sweltering heat of the day. I'm gonna probably go back and forth with Jun. So I'm just gonna say that up front. I'm gonna try and stick to one, but in case I don't, please forgive me. Additionally, Saeed, who's wearing his interrogator's hat, grills Michael to explain what he did to provoke Jin's attack. Michael does not know, but does state that traditionally there has been no love lost between his and Jin's ethnic groups. Later, even Walt asks Michael what he did to entice Jin's anger. Father and son bicker, with Michael stating he knows his son's birthday, but Walt does not know Michael's. It seems that minor differences can lead or cause larger divides. Meanwhile, Jack, Kate, Locke, and Charlie hike up a mile or so to the cave where Jack found water. Before leaving for their hike, Kate and Jack are engaged in flirtatious banter, which solicits one of the best lines from Charlie. If you guys are finished verbally copulating, we should move. There's a whole beach of people waiting for us to get some drinking water for them. And the great white hunter's getting restless. Camera POV focuses on Locke as he is shaving his face with a short-bladed knife. While at the cave, Jack and Kate find two bodies, a male and a female, which the group ends up dubbing Adam and Eve. Jack surmises the mummified bodies have been there for 40 to 50 years. Jack additionally finds a pouch of polished stones. Is this foreshadowing of events to come? Only time will tell. After calculating how much water would have to be carried down to the beach each day, Jack lands on the idea that the survivors should move to the cave to be nearer the water. This decision does not go over well with the other two main leaders of the survivors. Kate is not convinced, and Saeed is against the idea because he wants to maintain the bonfire in hopes that a rescue plane will see their signal. Instead of water bringing the group together, it seems to split the group in two. Some move with Jack to the cave, such as Hurley, Charlie, Jun, and Sun, while others remain on the beach, such as Saeed, Kate, and Sawyer, who, by the way, doesn't waste time taking the vacated infirmary tent. Typical Sawyer. Locke extends a supportive hand to Charlie to help him kick his drug addiction, which leads to an interesting conversation between them about the island's power, which I'm sure we'll get into shortly as well. Flashbacks this week came from Sun and by extension Jun. The series of flashbacks summarize their courtship and give insight into their deteriorating marriage, in which Jun's costs to work for Sun's father may be too high. The big reveal of the week, Sun seeks out a quiet conversation in the third act with Michael, where it is revealed that she understands and speaks English. We had a little bit of foreshadowing of that last week. She explains why Jun attacked him. Michael was wearing a found watch, which happens to be Jun, which was Sun's father's, just to give a lot of context there. And she asked Michael for a favor. It seems that language will continue to be a barrier and a relationship wound still infected. Wow. So that's kind of a lot of the episode with a lot left to discuss.
Yeah, it's amazing how much they're able to get into each episode, um, even if they're only focusing on so many characters. Um,
Yeah. Like I noticed that
I
Claire wasn't even visible in this episode at all.
right.
And Hurley was there briefly, a little bit, but like we don't even have Rose, we don't have Claire. So
Yeah,
it's just
Hurley's comment
mostly.
about what's the deal with Jack and Kate?
Yeah.
And and Jack says, "What are we back in high school?" And Hurley's immediately like, "That's not a denial."
Yeah.
Um, Hurley hasn't had a lot of screen time, but I don't know. He still has a pretty significant impact on like his interactions with other characters.
Yeah, they do actually stand out. So I'm anxious to find out. And of course, I do actually know a little bit about it since I did get through episode 21 before we started our discussion. But yes, it'll be nice to get more on Hurley. Obviously, in this week, we have a lot of focus on Sun and June, which we has been quite a barrier up till now because they've spoken in Korean. And I mean, even though I have subtitles on, Korean is not translated um, until I think some of the flashbacks, which you definitely need the context for.
Yeah.
And then that's when it is translated. So we haven't really had an opportunity to have any insight into them. So it was nice to finally get some backstory with them. And we get quite a few flashbacks. And I was actually amazed at how much information we got in those flashbacks with just a little bit of time. I really feel like the writers summarized really well and highlighted real good narrative beats to give us an idea of their relationships, their courtship. We find out that uh, Sun is at a different socioeconomic level than Jun is. And he's, a hard worker, he has honor. And while she, wants to elope, he's like, no, I'm going to do this right. this is our culture, this is our tradition, and I'm going to go ask your father, and he's not afraid to do so, even though she, excuse me, indicates that, do you know who my father is? Like, I'm thinking, triad, he's the grand, godfather of the family type of thing.
Yeah, it definitely insinuates a bad
Yeah. Um,
character.
yeah, that, he feels he has value, he respects himself, he honors, you know, has honor and respect for her and for her father and their roles. And he also has strength in his position. He's not afraid. Um, and I thought that was very telling and gives insight into his personality, but it also gives a better understanding of the dynamics that's going on between them.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because up until this point, um, between those two characters, since they're the main ones for this episode, we've seen Sun kind of wanting to, find a way to communicate with the rest of the group so they're not on their own. We've seen her, kind of look after Walt. And then on the flip side, Jin has been a tale of like two cities. Like he's
Yeah.
kind of demeaning or, he's slapped Sun's hand away when she tried to help him prepare food, but then he's also providing food for other people. Um, so there is this big, like, unknown of why he's so polar opposites with everyone else in Sun. And and then with this episode, like the attack on Michael is so violent. He even like pushes Walt down to make sure he can continue attacking Michael. Um,
Yeah.
and the flashbacks kind of they don't absolve Jin of his actions, but they kind of make me question well, who is Jin and what is he really like? Because at the courtship stage, you see him, you know, flirting with Sun and wanting to treat her very well and give her what she deserves,
And
and
I
then
would
as you
project what she's used to as well,
yeah
as a motivator for him to want to move up into that class system, to continue to give her the comforts that he believes, I think she expects or
yeah
deserves, like you said.
and so then as we see him doing some violent whatever those violent actions are, he comes back to the apartment covered in blood, like, and he's doing that. He tells her doing that for her father. Um, and then we see the dynamic when he doesn't answer her, she slaps him in the face. And so you see this stark contrast of like, whoa, uh, you know, I at this point you think, oh, Sun is like she's in an abusive relationship. Um, um, but it seems that when she's shocked by that appearance with Jin covered in blood and he's not talking to her, her only outlet is to smack him. Um, so I found that very interesting. And wondering if like they just kind of coalesced into this toxic relationship, even though they started from a place where maybe they really appreciated who they are, and then
Yeah.
whatever it was that he did to join the family business kind of uh, made that initial thing fall apart.
Yeah, I think this kind of our discussion leads into favorite scene or standout moment from the episode. And I'm gonna for me, since we're talking about it, I feel like the series of Son's flashbacks that summarize her and Jin's courtship and marriage really were kind of the highlight. And in particular, um, we find out through those flashbacks that, that point when he came home covered in blood, he's not talking to her. We've kind of seen him, go deeper and deeper into the father's business. And while she seems to know what her father's about, I felt like that scene when he's washing the blood off and is just basically completely shut down, and she's trying to get him to talk. And then, I think he kind of pushes her back and she smacks him really
Mm.
hard. I really felt like that was such a pivotal moment in the episode because it was so completely jarring because it's such an intimate moment. And I feel like you see their faces and their expressions, and I feel like Son has completely woken up to realizing exactly what her father and by her extension, her husband are into. While at the same time, I feel like Jun is making the realization that he's a broken person because of what he's become in order to have Son as his wife. Is kind of like the really old story about the husband and wife, and they don't, the husband and wife don't have anything. So she cuts off her hair to give him a chain for his watch, his beloved watch, while he goes out and sells or pawns his watch to give her a comb for her beautiful long hair. And so in the end, there's sacrifices on both sides, but not really a point of happiness. And I feel like in a way that old story is kind of mirrored in this one. So I feel like that was kind of the standout. The flashbacks as a series kind of coming together as a long scene, and then that moment in the bathroom. Um, and then, of course, we see further, Sun has made plans and, put into motion to leave Jun and her father, um, and, disappear until they think that she's dead so that she can live her life because it has become that bad for
Yeah.
her. So, what about you?
Um, well, um, I will say before I get to my favorite scene, just to touch back on the those flashback scenes, talking about her setting up the escape plan.
Mhm.
Um, Watching her struggle while she's in the airport when she's supposed to leave at the appropriate time, um, and the decision that she makes to stay, and and whether she decides that before or after um, Jen shows her the flower, which is a flower he showed her like during their courtship. I'm not sure, but it's almost like that's her way of, I don't know if it's her being afraid to move on or if she just doesn't want to give up on him and their relationship. I don't know, but it's a very heartfelt scene. And there are moments it's so hard to say like who these characters are because there are moments where, Jin looks, concerned for Sun and her opinion, like when she goes next to him in the airport and she's upset and he's like what's wrong? And she plays it off and say that the flower is too beautiful. But it's just so there's clearly a significant bond there. And kind of to piggyback with what you were saying earlier about, um, it just seems that they came together happy, but
Mhm.
then to make each other happy, they twisted into these different versions of themselves that then made the relationship unhappy. Um, so I think seeing all of that play out, um, makes me curious to know, like, especially I remember watching the first time wondering, well, will they make it on the island? Like,
Yeah.
how will their relationship, will it stay the same? Will it evolve? Will they fall apart? Um, so, it's again, the creators have done a great job producing, um, dynamic characters and the relationships that they have, um, and the friction that comes along, even though these characters seem like they should be tight together. Like,
Yeah.
the whole insinuation of Kate and Jack like hooking up,
Yeah.
uh, but by the end, they're not on the same page and
Yeah.
land on separate, um, camps on the beach. So, um, my favorite scene, I talked to you briefly offline about this, but it's only a few seconds long. And I could be reading too much into this. And maybe it's because I like Locke's character so much. But when Jack is leading, Locke, Kate, and Charlie to the cave and the water source,
Hmm.
they come across this opening in the jungle where there's like a pretty level, flat field with the jungle in the distance. And everyone's walked by, and Locke just stops for a second and kind of looks out, and the camera pans to see the jungle, and he kind of has this quick look of identifying something. And it makes me wonder, does he see something out there? Is it his connection to the island? And like when he was talking to Jack about he's seen the eye of the island, and like does he have this perception that is so finite that he's able to determine, he's clearly he's a tracker and a hunter, and he's a very capable person. But that scene just kind of almost highlighted his skill in a way. And I don't even know if I understand it. But throughout the episode, he's able to deduce that Charlie is addicted to something.
Yeah.
And talks about like you're gonna run out sooner than later, and it's gonna be painful detox. And he talks about, if you give it up now, at least you're the one giving it up. Um, and just like having so when he sees that open field,
Hmm.
and it just has that look of like he's seeing something, it almost highlights all the other things he's seen. Like, I think it was last week where he went to find Jack and he's like, no, 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 Saeed and Kate, you need to stay here. Everyone looks up to you. Um, Talking to Charlie, like staying back in the cave so he can get to know Charlie better.
Yeah.
But he's doing it so he can keep an eye on Charlie, and he wants to help him. And so, um, again, that scene is only a few seconds. And I could be blowing it well out of proportion. There's nothing to it. And I don't think I've ever really thought about it that much in previous episodes. At least I don't recall thinking about it too much. And did you ever, I don't know if you know the scene I'm talking about, but,
I
um,
do sort of, but you know what? It was such a quick scene that, I kind of didn't linger on it, but I could totally, just kind of based on what we've seen so far, the fact that even though Locke's namesake is an analytical, I'm going to say more analytical philosopher, Locke, the character, has become definitely more grounded in a mysticism, and a mystique about the island. Like he is able to connect with the island, and him as a hunter, the walkabout, um, all the all the 4 years before that, he's been able to kind of refocus his senses and his mind on things, I think has allowed him to become more observant, more knowledgeable about survival, because obviously that has been his interest, is to do that walkabout, at least for some time. We don't know how long. So I could definitely see him reading the landscape and taking it in, because he is seeing something that not anybody else is seeing. He has faith in the island that I think I'm going to say most others have not. I think Jack may be kind of converting over in that he's willing to leave the beach, because he's not saying that he's given up hope for rescue, but for the purpose of survival.
Yeah.
He knows that they need to be closer to a water source. They also need to have some sort of shelter to live in, to get out of the elements, because it seems to rain somewhat often. Um, like Hawaii, every afternoon there'd be a rainstorm that would come through, and then it, be on its way. It'd be an hour or whatever. But do you want to sit in soaking wet clothes and in the middle of winter with that kind of stuff? No, probably not.
Yeah.
So I could definitely see your reading of that would be that way, because that's what we're learning about Locke. I think that Locke is a very observant person. It's kind of like when you lose a particular sense, another sense grows stronger. And I don't think that's any different for Locke's situation. He's just had 4 years to develop other senses, and now he can walk again. Those
Yeah.
other senses don't go away because they're heightened. He is very observant, and honestly, it's not too far of a stretch for Charlie to not read that Charlie's having a problem. Especially when he tries to sneak off into the jungle to, have another little smack of heroin. You know, he may not think anybody's seeing him, but Locke is there. Locke is observant. So, the fact that Locke really wants to help him, um, speaks something to Locke's desire to help others, but not necessarily take the credit, like we saw with finding Vincent.
Yeah.
He makes the whistle. He's able to attract the dog. He ties him up to the tree and says, "Michael, go give your son the dog." So that there's credit. I think what's interesting too with Locke around this particular instance with Charlie, he kind of has some leverage, because I think he already knew the guitar was up on the cliff, when he tells Charlie that, the island gives, but it also expects to be given something.
Yeah.
You have to make a sacrifice. What's more important to you? And the fact that music is more important to Charlie, and he was able to say how many days he hasn't been able to play. It shows
Yeah.
how passionate he is about playing. Um, and to the point that he's willing to give up the heroin. I mean, yeah, the supply is going to be gone. And then, what does he have left? He doesn't have that, and no guitar, to kind of bang out his frustrations and things. So, that was kind of a cute moment when, you know, he does give what he has left to Locke, and then he tells him to look up, and of course Charlie's like, and that that's such a great comment that Charlie makes. He's like, "Oh, are you wanting me to pray?" You know?
Yeah, yeah.
And he's like, "No, look up." And there's the guitar gate case, So, it all kind of plays into that mysticism, that concept of having faith in the island. And, Locke obviously knows more because he's closer to, I'm gonna God in quotes.
Yeah.
He's closer to the island than anyone else because he has more knowledge. It's like, reading the Bible and having the knowledge versus someone who's illiterate and someone else has to mediate it for them. So I see that kind of being the case here.
And he
Locke
was the
mediating.
first one to call them Adam and Eve,
Yeah.
um, and even just uh, the moment when Charlie's about to walk out and John just falls right behind him, and
I
Charlie's like, "Are you
know.
following me?" And he's just like, "Yes."
Uh-huh.
And, and this is before he calls him out on the drug use, but he's finding a way to like stay close to him, and he says, "Hey, it's dangerous out there. I'm not going to leave you out of my sight." Like,
Yeah.
um, and but he also tries to build a connection with him by telling him, "Hey, I know you're bass player of Drive Shaft," and
Yeah,
tells him
he
his
actually
opinion on the
knows
two
who Charlie
albums.
is. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so there's just something endearing about um Terry Quinn's character. I mean, he's great to watch. He has a great handle, and like most of the people who have a role on this show, they seem to capture whatever the creators were hoping for when they
Yeah.
signed them for these roles. So it's, Locke was definitely up there. He up there with like one of the most interesting characters from this episode.
So that's a great lead into our second question. Uh you said Locke is one of the most interesting characters, but is he the most interesting, or did you have someone else in mind?
All right. So another person I was debating was Michael, like how he was handling being attacked, having Saeed doubt his account of it,
Mhm.
having a father have his son watch that happen to him. I have definitely felt like I've been paying more attention to Michael's character this time around as a father. Um, just to like kind of, it's just a different perspective. Um, and
Well, and can I ask, let's see, I would imagine the first time you watched it through, were you a father at that time?
Nope. When the series ended was 2010. Our daughter Adelaide was born in 2012, and our son Marshall was born in 2014. Um, so I had rewatched it at some point
Mhm.
when they were younger, but for some reason this time around, maybe it's because Walt is older.
Walt's
Than
about the age of Marshall, isn't he?
So Marshall's
They were
10 right
married.
now, and Ads is 12. So maybe because Walt and Marshall are similarly aged, you're right. That could be why I'm like
Mhm.
more interested in like how Michael's dealing with everything. He, Walt admits to him in this episode, like, my mom didn't talk about you. Like, I don't know anything about you. Um, and knowing that Michael didn't know I had a kid and that he, you know, and he's letting that all fly out to Jen when Jen is handcuffed to the thing and he's got the axe and he's kind of threatening. Jen looks terrified,
Oh, he does, yes.
um, and he's just like, I didn't know I had a kid. Now I'm responsible for Walt, and so I can imagine how overwhelming that is. Oh, something else I wanted to ask you about. After Jin is handcuffed,
Hmm.
there's a scene where Walt is looking at him and he's looking back at him. But Jin is looking softly at Walt. And it almost is like, is he remorseful for shoving Walt? Is he remorseful for having Walt see what he did to Michael? But I just it and maybe again, maybe I'm reading too much into these like small scenes, but Michael abruptly comes over and asks if he said something to his boy and um
Yeah.
but it just um he
I did
was
wonder
Jim was
about
much
that
more
too.
reserved in that scene. Like even when he responded to Michael there, he was just like, nah, just it was very much more passive of a response.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you took anything away from the way Jin was looking at Walt in that moment.
More questions than anything because I felt like Walt really hasn't interacted with Jin. It's been with Sun. And so I did kind of wonder like what's going on there? Is that, kind of alluding to maybe something coming on the horizon? Um, or is it a matter of Jun who maybe hasn't been around a whole lot of kids? Claire grabbed his hand and put his hand on her belly to feel the kick of the baby, which, they don't have kids. Jun and Sun don't have kids. And then, just wailing on Michael right in front of Walt. Yeah, maybe he realizes um that that was inappropriate and that he maybe he did dishonor, that there are other ways to um handle that situation. Um yeah, I'll leave it at that. I think this is one of those conversations I think we definitely need to come back to as we get a few more episodes in, just because,
Yeah.
I think the concept of that father-son relationship will come up again through a couple other characters, and I think Jun is one of them. So, but when I watched it through the first time, um, I definitely was kind of curious, like what was going on there between them, because I do feel that, like you said, Jun was softer and a little more um, less challenging, and more taking things in and maybe reflecting on his
Yeah.
actions and his behavior, um, and maybe questioning if he did the right thing, but we don't know. Hopefully we'll know. Maybe they'll address that scene down the road. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Um,
and
so
I and I can't remember.
yeah.
And I know I sidestepped the initial question of most interesting or favorite characters from this episode. So John and Michael were definitely up there. I feel like I just keep going back to Sun's character. We learn a lot more about her and her relationship, um, and kind of the way their relationship begins to erode and how they respond to one another. Um, and the way she ultimately sticks by his side at the airport. It's not that I'm advocating for the way, you know, Jin, working extra hours, not being home as often, um, and then the way he's treated her on the island with like slapping her hand away or
Mhm.
telling her to button her blouse. Um, but that scene at the end kind of like gave me hope for them, like that maybe they will find what they had early on. Um, And then obviously like her coming clean to Michael and speaking to him is a big deal because then we don't know if, if that gets out, how will Jen react that she's
Yeah.
speaking English and then will that then completely end their relationship altogether? So, yeah, I would say Sun, that's where I lean the most as far as the most interesting character this episode. How about you?
Uh, well, before I reveal mine, I do have a question for you because it came to mind, and then we'll look back around. But in watching the fight break out, Jun just coming up from behind and tackling Michael and wailing on him. Did you, just curious, at any time think that maybe Son had revealed to Jun that Michael had seen her topless?
Oh, um, not this time around. Perhaps maybe when I initially watched it. But the scene plays out so quickly. Like
Yeah,
Jin is clearly irate. And he is just tunnel vision on Michael. Um, so I don't know if I ever picked up on any cues on that what the issue was
yeah.
before Sun revealed it was about the watches.
Yeah, I know that when I watched it, I thought about the in the prior episode, the fact that Michael had seen her topless. He comes through and just like lands in the clearing and sees her because she's kind of sponge bathing herself. But I never did think that Sun actually told Jun what had happened because I think she knew that one, he'd be very irate and would be violent
Yes.
to Michael. But I think, especially when there was already a little bit of tension between the two that already existed. But I also felt that I just didn't think that for Michael to leave Walt with Sun, I really did not, what I was seeing so far was Sun's character before the flashbacks, that Sun did not strike me like the type of person that would say anything about it, about what had
Yeah.
happened. That would be what would be to gain from that, especially when Michael has relied on her. Um, why would she do that in return? Because they have
Yeah.
there never been any animosity between those two. But then, when we find out she can actually speak and understand English, then we know that that embarrassing, awkward moment, she
Yeah.
completely understood him and probably felt for him and, was probably a little taken aback, probably a little, well, definitely surprised. I don't know if there's any sort of attraction between them due to the fact of her kind of the state of her marriage with Jun. But yeah, I surprisingly never, my thought never went that way, seeing that opening scene. But
Yeah.
to bring it back around to the most interesting character in my mind, I agree. I think it was Sun. We got so much flashback that really helped to kind of ground her character. And the fact that she has to be so conflicted by the emotions of her marital situation, all that she's been through, to realize her decision to stick by June put her into the situation of the being on the plane and being on the island now with him. Um, but that he has become totally protective. He's probably protective before, but he was also probably distracted by the work. So they probably
Yeah.
not spending as much time. I'm making assumptions, but I feel now that they're on the island and all of his attention is there aren't all the external things to divert him from being an attentive husband, but he's going about it in a way that it's like she's with her father again, probably that kind of dictatorial um, oversight of all of her actions and how she's supposed to feel, what she's supposed to dress, what kind of, demeanor she's supposed to put out to society. So I'm sure there's a lot of conflict there as well. And I'm really very curious. Again, we got some questions answered, but there's more questions there. What's going to happen to Sun and Jun? Eventually, my thought, he's going to find out that she can speak English because I really do think she wants to be more inclusive with the group.
Yeah.
Um, and it just because of the situation and they're in a survival mode, at some point it's going to have to come out that she can speak English. Um, and what's that going to do? Because that takes further control away from Jun, in, for a culture that's very patrimonial. Um, and to have a wife that can speak English and interact with a lot more people, her sphere greatly increases. Now, we don't know if June can speak English. So maybe he actually can too, or maybe he'll be open to her teaching him. There's so many possibilities for a positive outcome, but there's just as many, if not more, outcomes that will not keep them together, which would be sad. They seem like they were very much in love and they had that young love. And, it's sad when that dissipates because of influences outside and decisions and choices they've made.
Yeah. I mean, it's telling when they get married or they're still engaged. I'm not sure at this point, but he gets home or she gets home to the puppy
Hmm.
and he admits that he's not home that much anymore. And he just wanted her to be able to have some company. Um, and her response is something like along the lines of, "Don't you remember when all you needed to give me was a flower?" Um, and so it's interesting to know that it didn't matter necessarily that he was, you know, didn't have as much money before working for her father. Um, and now that he is making all that money, but he's not home.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see how they have, you know, they fit. Like when they started dating, they were all that they needed. And then
Yeah.
maybe whatever the other person thought was needed for them to coexist, it just, um, so yeah, you're right. I really want to know. And again, even though I've watched the series several times, I don't remember everything. So I
Hmm.
don't remember all of the nuances or all the episodes when things happen. So I'm interested to see um, how the relationship moves forward in in what way. I mean, clearly I remember some big things, but um, um, I think that's what's fun about talking about it again is because I don't remember everything, you know. Sometimes I feel like my memory is as good as a stale cracker, but I just I um but I definitely think Sun definitely this was her episode to shine. Um Definitely saw more from her and we saw more from her and Jen in this episode than any other episode. So
Yeah.
it was good that we were able to get them together. Um and the big question will just be moving forward how they will relate.
Yeah. Because there's a big chasm there between their views about being on the island that's very unresolved. So yeah, it'll be definitely interesting. Um, I was going to ask you, what did you think about how the split happened between the group that went to the cave versus the group that stayed on the beach? Any thoughts about that? Any surprises for you?
Um, I think the I think the biggest um not that it was a confrontation, but I think Saeed was rightfully taken aback when Jack was kind of making these decisions without discussing it with anyone else. Um, and he's like the quote is like when did you choose to start a new civilization without consulting us?
Yeah.
Like, and I think that's necessary. Like, you need to have that conversation where, like, hey, like, I'm not saying we can't do it, but you need to talk to the rest of the group. Um, and I think that if they could have just maybe come together and said, hey, we can have two camps. Like, people can take breaks and they can trade places to, have the shelter for better night's sleep. And um, I wasn't surprised by Sawyer staying. I think he was going to stay on the beach, regardless, even though he was kind of prodding Kate to see where she was going to go.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, she stayed. I think how would have Sawyer played it if she had gone to the caves? I think that's the only reason maybe he would have. But for the most part, it seemed like he was going to stay. Kate, um, she seems pretty adamant of trying to get off the island, so it makes sense. Um, I know her and Jack have a good bond, but um, for whatever reason, I think she's probably also she didn't vocalize it, but she probably wished that Jack would have talked it out with her without because she's been side by side with him the whole time. She's been like we've talked about, she's been like the glue of the group, keeping everyone
Yeah.
together, and she's probably like, "What, dude? Why the hell didn't you talk about this with me before just casting it to the whole camp?"
Yeah, I do feel the way that it came up, he was just like his wheels were so in motion so quickly. Um, that he forgot to talk to others first and kind of, you know, hash out the plans. Like I like to me, I think your idea of like, rotating the group up to the caves. So sometimes some days they're up there, maybe they're focused in on more hunting, gathering, getting fruit versus being down on the beach where you're working on the fire and, firewood and, fishing and things like that to help the group and kind of do what Saeed was talking about in the prior episode of having, three or four groups doing different things and then stationing them, in different places. And then, you know, bringing all those resources together from the wreckage so that you could actually make up a couple of camps that were, quite nice. I think with Kate kind of going back to her and her decision to stay on the beach, I was a little bit surprised by, and I know Jack was surprised that she didn't want to come to the cave, and he felt like that was a no-brainer. Um, but she does comment to him that he's like trying to probe like why, and she said, "You closed the door to that. You didn't want to know." So I'm not going to tell you, is basically paraphrasing her
Yeah.
conversation with him. And I thought that was quite a strong stand to take. Yeah, spunky. And there he goes. um,
Yeah, no, you're right. That um I remember watching that the first time and being struck by how decisive she was when he's trying to like confront her and say, "Hey, why are you like this? What did you do?" And she's like, "No, you had your chance." Like I was like, "Wow, that's I mean, I get it. Like she tried to be open and he said he didn't want to know. So for her to be to shut it down right now,
Yeah,
um I mean the communication's got to be able to go both ways. She tried to
yeah.
be open and he didn't want to hear it.
Well, and if you take a look forward into the future and they get rescued, excuse me, then what happens to her? Because she's on America's Most Wanted, basically. I mean, she had a U.S. Marshal after her that went all the way to Australia to get her. Um, or New Zealand. So my feeling is that she wants off the island badly, but why? It's
Yeah,
almost, she's almost in a similar situation as Locke. Locke knows that if he gets off the island, he probably won't be able to walk again because he believes in the island and the mysticism and the magical powers around the
yeah.
island. Kate doesn't have that kind of illusions about the island. So why is she so hot to get off the island? Because how are you going to keep running? Because you'll get rescued. You're going to have to give your name. Maybe you could give a fake name, but everybody knows her as Kate, unless Kate is not her real name, and that's just the one she gave,
Yeah.
or had. It's just one of her aliases. But I don't know where she'd be in a better situation off the island. I
That's a
don't
great question. I always wondered why she was antsy to leave. Um, you know, you would think getting off the island means that she's going to find herself in handcuffs.
Yeah,
So, I never understood that dynamic. Maybe it's a sense of just not liking that she feels trapped on the island. I don't know. But um,
I
yeah, it's a good point with Locke too. Like the miracle of being able to walk again, and I can imagine his desire to leave is very low. So,
yeah. The other thing I was going to kind of bring up is the fact that we did actually have an actual song for
yes,
this episode. And once again, it's not just a song that's playing um
just to play.
just to play. It requires a character to trigger the song. And so once again, we have Hurley. He's got his little, you know, what were those? A D2 or D5, the disc player. And he's kind of looks like he might have a little bit of power left. And he sits down near the waterfall and he pulls out his headphones. And he listens to a Willie Nelson song called Are You Sure? And so montage of images of the survivors as they settle in the cave and those survivors that stayed on the beach. And I thought I'd just read the lyrics, if you don't mind. I thought they were really
No,
good.
they fit the scene. And I think I don't know if we recorded this or we talked about this offline. How the songs, not background music or ambiance music, but the songs that they choose to play match whatever scene is happening, and this is no different.
Yeah. So the lyrics are look around you, look down the bar from you, at the faces you see. Are you sure this is where you want to be? And so of course, we've got the montage in the cave, and then it kind of transitions down to the beach. These are your friends, but are they real friends? Do they love you as much as me? Are you sure this is where you want to be? And right about there, Walt and Michael are sitting together at the campfire down on the beach. And it's kind of a nice father-son moment because Walt asks him when his birthday is. And they make a little bit of a connection. They move closer, that chasm that's dividing them, through years and years of not knowing each other. Now, is such a small thing, but small things add up to big things, right?
Great scene. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so then the song continues to say, the lyrics continue. You seem in a hurry to lead this kind of life, and you've caused so many pain and misery. But look around you, take a good look. Just between you and me, are you sure this is where you want to be? Please don't let my tears persuade you. I had hoped I wouldn't cry, but lately teardrops seem a part of me. But look around you, take a good look. Just between you and me, are you sure that this is where you want to be? And I know they spend a few moments lingering on Kate, on Sawyer, on Jack. Oh, the song was absolutely brilliant for this scene. And
Yeah.
I just really think that after the roller coaster of emotion and tension and violence, and the division between the groups and what that means, to then have this song where they're all contemplating, then they make the right decision. Um, Perfect. I mean, once again, the writers, picking a very appropriate song, um, and matching those up with just visuals that just punctuate so perfectly, and really help us as the audience to feel part of, wow, now we get to think about this for a week. What would I choose? Would I've stayed on the beach? Would I've gone to the cave? How do I feel about the people around me? Have I to gain trust of them? Are they going to care about me as much as maybe I care about them and things like that? I also noticed one observation for me is that they really didn't comment like what day this was. I think
Yeah.
up to this point, I think they were kind of saying what the day was. But this was the first episode where they didn't really say, oh, we're on, well, we're 8 days in, now we're moving to
Yeah.
the cave type of thing. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Just such little small things, now I kind of want to go back and see, did Michael have a watch on before? And then in like, the prior episode or the episode before that on episode 4, you know, did he find a watch? Do we see that in the background happen? And it's such a minor thing.
For some reason, I feel like there was maybe a small scene where maybe he did find a watch, but I don't know when. And back to the song at the end when they're highlighting the different characters at both camps, and then they both have like the side by side of Jack and Kate, kind of almost like an overlay, and where
Mhm.
you're getting both of their faces as the song's playing, and it's almost like it's focusing on them too because they're kind of are you two dating kind of thing. So um, and that kind of production, it makes me feel like, oh, are Jack and Kate supposed to be a legit couple? Like,
Yeah,
and having that song play of the uncertainty of their decisions and the people around them, like, you're right. Perfect song choice.
yeah. Well, I think that's kind of wrapping up all my notes for this week's discussion of House of the Rising Sun. How about you, Travis? Any last observations?
I don't, let me, I haven't even gone to my notes once this, uh, yeah, just a quick little perusal. Um, I think that we've touched everything. I think maybe the only other thing I noticed is like when Jen is still handcuffed to the plane Jack gives him water and he's tried to communicate just like a little bit.
Hmm.
Like I think um after last week when Jack was like, "Oh, I can't be a leader, I'll fail, I'm not good enough," and all that jazz. And like this week, it seemed like he was trying to have that purpose and lead people and just a little endeavor like, hey, Jin's in the sun, he's baking, like, you gotta drink some water, you gotta do it in small amount. So some little scenes like that kind of um really help um identify the important characteristics that see in the bigger picture of how these people are going to survive on the island.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that that was a good little clip as well because of the fact in the prior episode, everybody's like, "Where's Jack? Where's Jack?" And even Sun, I think, commented about, who's going to lead us, who's going to tell us what to do.
Mhm.
And it does seem like everybody's looking to Jack in the last episode. And, he has his little powwow out on the beach when he returns from his own little kind of walkabout. Um, so I could see him thinking that, well, I'm kind of the leader, and
Yep.
getting kind of caught up with trying to make the right decision, especially, as the doctor and the health welfare of all the survivors, and realizing that, somebody died on his watch that he didn't even know the name of. And,
Yeah.
now he's like, I'm not, I would almost think that he's thinking, I'm not going to let that happen again. I'm going to get to know each one, and each one's going to get my attention. I'm at least going to learn something about them. Even if I can't talk to them and I can't communicate with them, I think maybe he's almost gone back to his Socratic oath that, I need to make sure that people are getting what they need so they can survive, because I'm a
Yeah.
healthcare worker type of thing, mentality for him.
Yeah, and I do think that's kind of his driving force of he's just trying to protect everyone. And even though he didn't want to take on the leadership role, I think ultimately overall he's just trying to do what he's always been doing is make sure everyone is finding a way to survive. So,
Yeah,
um, yeah, already looking forward to see what happens next.
definitely. Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap up our discussion on House of the Rising Sun, episode 6. We'll be back next week with our discussion about episode 7. So if you're not subscribed, definitely subscribe, hit the notification bell. And if you have time and you think that we missed something or you just want to engage in a conversation, please feel free to leave a comment in the notes below. And otherwise, we will see you next week.